What's going on, ladies and gents? Welcome back to another episode of Louder Than Words. I am your co-host, Caleb Curl.
Hey, hey, and I'm your co-host, Tony Gaskins.
So this week, Tony and I reviewed a video that was surfacing. I'm sure some of you have probably seen it. If not, when you get some time, take a look at it, or not. It may not be that important to you, but we saw a video surface of a podcast from the UK, and they were doing an interview with, I think the comedian's name is Andrew Schulz. And Andrew made some jokes about black women, and he was talking about the black stereotypes. And I think the guys brought up the black girlfriend effect, and they were talking about how when a white guy gets with a black girl, he changes his haircut. But then Andrew kind of took it and said some very abrasive things about black women, and black Twitter took to it and responded, and cancel culture kind of was an uproar, and people just kind of went back and forth on Twitter about the platform and how the guys should have stood up and said something and been for black women instead of just kind of just being there laughing along with the joke. Now, Tony, I know you saw it. What are your thoughts on it? What did you get from it? Like, was it just a joke? And is that something he should be able to joke with, or did he go too far? And then also for the podcasters, should they have said something like it? Was it their duty to protect black women in that moment?
It was interesting because I watched it right before this again because I saw some feedback on it, and I saw like some black women from the UK that were upset about it and what he said. But when I watched it, just being a man and understanding the male environment when it's a bunch of men, it's kind of where white guys can joke like that around black guys that they know or they cool with, and you don't take it as serious as if like a white guy said it at the cafe or at the bar and you don't know him at all. And
Yeah,
so what he said, he was like, yeah, they shave their hair. White guys shave their hair because all the stress from black women complaining all the time. And they was like, no, the black dudes, they were like, no, black women, I mean, white guys with black girlfriends, they grow a beard and stuff. He was like, yeah, they grow a beard because it's more cushion for when the black woman slap them.
yeah,
And it was just, and they all were laughing, but it kind of was a situation to where if they would have switched it, the host of the podcast, if they would have been like, whoa, hold on, bro, hold on, don't do that, don't say that, it would have made it like, the guy Andrew, he would have felt very awkward and tense, and he would have been able to be like, man, y'all know I'm just joking, like don't try to grandstand on me and make me look like this villain when we just kicking it and talking. And so
yeah,
the,
yeah,
the the way it was set up, it didn't seem like he was super serious, but it had to come from somewhere.
yeah.
In your take on it, what did you get from it?
Yeah, same thing, man. I try not to take too much stuff on the internet too serious to where I allow it to disturb me emotionally. But I was just observing, paying attention to how people were responding to it and just how uproar and like upset people were. And just my perspective on it, just like, okay, like, yeah, I get it. That's it's the world though, right? Like the world gonna be the world. So like I'm not surprised of like that being said, but I was just kind of like more concerned, like, man, I wish all people, but our people specifically, would not be so emotionally like triggered by things like this and put that energy elsewhere. Like getting on Twitter, being on Twitter for however long people were, like, what else could you have done to further yourself and further and better the community than like being upset at a comedian and these podcasters and trying to put them in a certain position of leadership that they're just podcasters, they're doing what they do, they're just talking, and the name of their podcast goes hand in hand with what happened right there and the heat of that moment. But I do understand, just on a broad scope, of black women not feeling protected, black women feeling like I can see where how they got triggered by that, right? Like a white man making a joke, and then you have some traumatic things that you've gone through and your ancestors have gone through. So I get it. I see both sides. I try and view everything from every angle. But it made me really just sit back and really think about our culture and like what our people have gone through, and the stereotypes, right? Because you and I talked about it briefly, and it just I had to go sit back and like really think about like our culture and our people and like what has been done to us and like how those things systematically still are passed on today. And so it just made me really thinking about like, you know what? It made me personally say, you know what, as a man, and specifically as a black man, I want to make sure that I'm being careful with like how I talk about black women, what I say, and how I treat them, and understanding that our women need guidance, they need leadership, they need protection. And I think like even within media, it is very again, even those guys, I hope they learn from this, but when you have a platform, people are looking up to you and they receiving what you're saying as the gospel, even if it is, and even if you didn't ask for all of that. That's just kind of what happens with being on social media and YouTube and the podcast world. So again, I see all sides of it. But I think just the deeper thing for me, it just made me really think about the state of our women as well as our men. But like, okay, as men, like what can we do? And again, thinking about some of the stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. Some of them are true, but like, what's the reasoning? Where do they
Mhm.
come from? And that's something that you prompted me to think about the other day. You was just like, bro, seek to understand, because at first I was kind of like, the angle I was taking was a little aggressive, but then I sat back after we talked and I was like, you know what? Like, yeah, I need to see where this stems from. So, but
I saw too, like what Andrew said. I've heard that from other white guys. Like that is the image that they have of black women, of like aggressive and complaining and all of this. And so I was thinking about that, like, okay, where does this come from? And I think sometimes we look at the effect, but we don't think about the cause.
yeah,
And that's one thing that I've noticed with people of other races when they are addressing black people. And black people, we may do the same with other races, where when you're not a part of it, when you're not in it, you see the effect, but you don't think about the cause. And so it's kind of like, okay, why is this woman complaining all the time? Why is this woman aggressive and slapping somebody?
yeah,
And truth be told, I grew up with black women who will fight. And but it was a lot of women. I got into a fight in ninth grade with a white girl. She swung on me, and I was talking to her. Maybe I had her folder or something. She hit me in the jaw with a class ring on. And where I'm from, we had to fight. Like
yeah,
after I seen my cousin almost got beat up by a girl, I'm like, this is a different type of situation. And
yeah,
so I had to go ahead and defend myself. She got suspended. They wanted to suspend me, but my dad came in and said, no, she hit him first. And he's defending himself. But so I come from around that, seeing, and it's my mom is feisty, my sister is feisty, all my aunts on my mom's side are feisty. So there is truth to it. But I think we just have to also look at, okay, why?
yeah,
Why is that?
yeah,
And that podcast was not the space for them to really get deep or get serious, because they just kicking it and giggling like
right,
the
right,
podcast talk about. But if it was like a conversation over here, then I would have asked Andrew, like, That's interesting you say that, like slapping the guy and complaining all the time. Like, where do you get that from? Like, what is that? What you saying? Like, where does that come from? Or like, where did you see that?" And
right,
then go into it
right.
and understand it that way.
Yep, yep. And it's deep, bro. It's super deep because, like you said, like some of these things are true, but they do have a root somewhere, and you got to trace it back. And I think oftentimes that's what we don't do, even within the community. Black women complaining about black men complaining about black women, or some black men who, out of self hate, choose to date outside of the race or marry outside of the race, right? Because I have heard and seen that too, where some black men are like, man, I ain't dating no black woman because they argumentative and they just combative, they're not submissive, they're not this or that. And it's so layered because of the culture, especially here in the West and in the US, the culture that we grow up in, just like the corporate America thing, like code switching, right? Like culture is so deep that, especially for us as Black people, like we do the code switching thing. We gotta adapt to the culture around us, though our culture internally is a lot different than than the outside culture, you know. And so I think that's something I'm hoping that we can take a lessons away from this, is to really understand our history and to trace things back to, like you always say, man, to seek to understand, from Stephen R. Covey. I think that's what we don't do enough with one another, and that's why we are where we are. And because it's layered, it's like it's social economics, it's schooling, who you grew up around, you know, the home situation, is there a two-parent household or not? Like all of these things go into our emotional intelligence, our social intelligence, and how we treat one another, you know. But I'm hoping that that we can take this and educate ourselves and do a shift. I think it's important for people who haven't read or researched, like look into the Willie Lynch letter, like just look it up on Google. I think that's very important because it talks about, like, in slavery, how slave masters would take this manual and how they would implement certain things to keep the slaves at odds with one another, right? And how these things are continually being passed down today through whatever means, through it being systematic, epigenetic, like whatever you want to say it is. But just understanding this, I think we're moving into a time right now where people, we have so much access to be on the internet, to be entertained. But whatever you're being triggered by, whenever you see certain things like that, go and educate yourself on this instead of just wasting your energy being upset about nothing that you can't change, you know. But I think we can shift the culture if we educate ourselves on our women and on our men, because again, you and I talked about it yesterday, and I spoke to my dad about it, and I was kind of expressing like my viewpoint on it. And he was just like, he started telling me, he's just like, man, like when he was growing up, he didn't really see healthy marriages, you know, amongst his family. And like he comes from a big family, you know, like I think my great grandparents had like 14, 15 kids, you know, and he's just like, he was just telling me stories of like how my grandmother got married at 13 just because she just needed to get out of the house. And so older men were coming after her who were old enough to be her father, right? So just little things like this, as we trace back our history and we wondering why, you know, domestic violence or certain things stems within our community. It's so many layers to it. And I think that we got to go look at this and then bring this information back to get new understanding and be able to be compassionate. And then so after talking to you yesterday and then talking to my dad about it and just kind of pausing and looking at, like, okay, why are women the way they are and how come men are, is because of so much that has happened to us. Even, you know, he was telling me just like he reminded me about the Willie Lynch letter and how the man was sodomized in front of the family, right? Like, so where that stems, and then generations that follow from that lineage, if that pain, that trauma, that hurt has never been uprooted, what does that look like in today's age that we have to deal with, right? And so it's a lot. I think just compassion is the thing that I have now for both men and women. I like to see how you know, people took that energy and they were standing up for Black women and just like, no, that ain't true, and this and that. I think we got to do that more, but do it from compassion for both sides, just as equally as somebody both within the culture and outside of the culture is talking negatively about our women and our men. We got to stand up and have these conversations more and educate ourselves and lead from a place of compassion, you know.
And that's one thing that I realized that I always struggle with as a man, because as you know, as a man, we are taught to suck it up and be tough and don't cry. And so I'm really hard on myself as a man, and I don't really give myself a lot of grace to, be in my feelings. And then that makes me hard on other men and make me hard on my oldest son. But
Yeah.
now I'm seeing that he's 17, and I'm like, you know what? This kid that I treated like a man is actually a kid, and
Yeah.
he is sensitive, and he has feelings, and he has worries and concerns, but he has learned how to like mask it and cover it up. And I found myself over the last like year and a half just really speaking life into him and just
Mm,
pouring into him and just telling him. And I've being able to pick up on when he's unsure of himself and when what he is saying is a cue to say, I need to hear affirmation right now. And it's been an interesting feeling for me as a man. And then it's different because I'm his father, but just saying like, yeah, son, you got it. Like you really that guy. Like you really are the best player on the field pretty much any game you get out there. And just talking to him about the classroom, being a leader and not being a follower, and just these constant lessons, and just realizing like where the insecurity. So I asked him because I said to one of my white friends, I was like, man, I've had to sign a couple of slave contracts over the years and like deals. And I said, you know what? This friend here, he try to be funny, but sometimes his funniness can be insensitive. Like, kind of like the Andrew guy, but worse. And I was like, what if he says back to me, oh, slave contract. I'm pretty sure you and your people are used to those. And I said that in my head. And then I asked my son, I was like, son, if you talk to a white guy and you telling him, like, man, yeah, if I'm going to MLS or whatever, I might sign a slave contract just to get in there. And he said, oh, well, you and your guys used to that. You and your family used to those. I said, what would you say? He said, I'll probably just laugh. And I was like, oh, okay. I said, because I asked him, how is your generation handling this stuff? And he was like, Dad, he was like, we're not racist like that. He's like, it's just jokes across the board. He was like, we just laugh. And he's like, anytime I'm carrying something new, they're like, Tony, did you steal that? And he's like, I just laugh at it because he's like, we don't take it that serious, like your generation. And that hit me because I've said that before, but I don't really listen to my own advice of like not allowing somebody to shift my energy or make me feel less than or crack a joke and me be hurt by it. But instead, if I'm with my homeboys and they of another race, I crack a joke back. And then I realized that because we went through so much, we take jokes differently. But you could say a joke that's just as hurtful or worse to a white guy, and he will fall on the ground rolling. But he doesn't have the same trauma oftentimes. And
Right.
so it's different, but I definitely believe we have to be careful with woe is me and being a victim, because we could defeat ourselves and hinder our own growth and greatness in the world by allowing stuff to get to us instead of just reversing it and sending it back. Not saying be negative or nasty, but just say, no, that's not me. I'm not accepting that. I'm not going to wear that.
Yeah.
And instead of internalizing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important. Because words are powerful, joking or not. The spirit, the soul, the subconscious does not know the difference between what is true and what is a joke. And so we got to be careful with words. And even myself, just growing up in the South, trying to fit in with the boys, like you start making these jokes, racist jokes, sexist jokes, whatever, ageist, prejudice, all these things, and you're joking about it, but that becomes a part of you, and you don't realize it until you run across somebody and you realize like, oh, that hurts them, or oh, that's not the, and you rethink like these things. A lot of the jokes and things that we say and do as adults stem from childhood, and it's protection mechanism, and so we have to be very mindful of that, and speak life, like that's something that I've had to work on, and just understanding certain conversations, if especially when, because I have a lot of friends from all different races and backgrounds. If Don't joke with me if you can't sit down and have an intellectual conversation about this same joke and allow me to express to you why you shouldn't say this, right? Because I've lost some friendships over that. I had a homeboy one time who was white, and we had a conversation about farming grants in the South. And he was telling me like, because of the minority grants, he felt as a white man that it was against him. He felt marginalized. And I was just like, I was kind of laughing about it. I was like, really? Like, bro, this is why this grant exists. Do you understand that America, this industry, agriculture was built off of the backs of black people, and like he just didn't get it right. And we got into a little bit of an argument over it. But what I realized though is that we're all ignorant because we can only see things from our perspective. Right here, from this side, it's like, okay, this is light, right? On your side is dark brown, right? So it's just perspectives. That's what I've realized with the world, and I've had to learn to gauge certain conversations, but also just certain jokes. Like, you know what? Like, let me not joke in this manner with certain people because I know I can't go to that place with you intellectually to have an intelligent conversation. Let me just avoid this altogether, and just I don't know, just wait, because we are in a different time. Something else that I think about too, in comparison to like my parents' generation, like you and I went to integrated schools. Like my mom and dad were growing up where integration it was coming together and it was there, but their schools were still predominantly black. Versus like me, like I remember just going to private school, walking in a classroom, and I'm the only person that looks like me. My parents don't know what that's like, to go in the classroom and everybody looks like you is one thing, but to go in a classroom and it doesn't. So it's just so much culturally today, like just generationally, like we're having to go through and understanding one another culturally. But media, other things, we oftentimes just give into stereotypes without actually really having real conversations with one another to seek to understand and not just be so judgmental firsthand, So it's layered, man. It is layered, but
We
we
need
got
a
to be
lot of
careful
heat.
with the joking, man.
We need a lot of healing. And that's
Yeah.
one thing too of like I remember a family member, a female family member was in a relationship and she told me she was like, I'm so used to being abused. I'm so used to like a guy trying to fight me or him cheating on me and then me trying to fight him that now that I'm in a like a chill relationship, I don't know how to act. And she was telling me
Yeah.
like that like every 3 days she gets this itch to where she has to start a fight. And
Yeah.
she just will be like out of nowhere, let me see your phone. Who are you talking to? I know you cheating on me. I know you cheat me. Give me your phone. Why you won't give me your phone? If you're not cheating, let me look at your phone.
Yeah.
And the guy be like, what are you talking about? What is going on? Like we just was laughing and joking. And when she was telling me this, I was like, man, like that's serious. But then I realized I'm like, you know what? I've had to deal with that as a man too, of not being able to trust myself because of the man that I was. And then also when you see things with women and then you go into a relationship and you wondering and you like my wife and her, the soccer moms, they be up doing laundry, watching stuff on Netflix, and they'll text each other like 10:30 at night, 11 o'clock at night. And so when I see that, a lot of times I'd be like, who texting? But I'm thinking of like the old when I was in the dating world of
Yeah.
like, if you get a text this time of night. And so it's been times that I'll be like, who text you this time of night? And she'll be like, oh, Heather, Lindsay, Jessica. And she'll show it to me. And I'm like, y'all text this time of night? Like, what y'all talking about? And I'm looking at the text, it's like just mom stuff. But just because of my past and what I've seen, what I've done, it will almost trigger me. And I had to learn, like, okay, listen, you're not the man that you used to be, and you're in a safe space. And so that's what I really want men and women to understand because now it's more of a movement about men healing.
Yeah.
But even with women, it's like, okay, you don't have to yell at a guy, you don't have to curse at a guy, you don't have to fight him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to the guy, you can drop your guard and you can fall in love and you can trust love and let love happen instead of just holding on to what you've seen online about these men getting cheated on.
Yeah.
And that lead me to think about the conversation I seen online where it was just like this group of men and it was like a pity party. And it was just one side of the story. So here's this black guy, he podcast mic like me, and then he had like this guy look, Middle Eastern or something mixed or something, and
Yeah,
he
yeah,
was talking about the guy said he was with a woman for 8 years, and then he was married to her for 1 year, but she cheated on him with another guy, and that now he done had to move out the house. They going through a divorce, but he's still paying for the house that she living in with another guy. A lady sent it to me, and she was like, "Look at this." Just she was talking about like the toxic red pill, and so here's this guy that made a woman wait for 7 years before he married her, and he looked maybe 35 to 40, and then she cheats on him. I'm like, well, that don't add up. Why you made her wait 7 years for marriage? Like, you grown. Like, why you didn't marry after 2 years, after 3 years? So could it be that you was neglecting her, that you was abusing her, that you was mistreating her? Like, what did you do? But he
yeah,
came on there like the victim. But I could look at him and tell by his beard, by his energy, by his aura, he's not a victim. But the way he painted it, now you got hundreds of men in the comments. Oh, that's why you can't trust these such and such. Oh, this man look amazing. This man is handsome. This man got it all, and he got cheated on. And I'm like, we didn't even hear the other side of the story. Like,
yeah,
this his side of the story. And so
yeah.
that's what I mean by that victimhood.
Yeah, yeah, and like you said, just perspectives. We see things so one sided in the world, but not understand that one, just as a people, we're all one. If for especially for those of us as believers, we are all a part of the body of Christ. We are all God's children. We are all God's sons and daughters. But we get so caught up in the world, and we get so caught up in our view when we find somebody or we see somebody online that speaks to something that we can relate to and it's traumatic, we just jump on it. But then out of our mouth or the keyboard, we complain about the opposite sex and say they're all this or that, not realizing that we're going to continue to perpetuate the same cycles within our life, within our reality, whether it's race related, sexism related, men are this, women are that, whatever the case may be. But understanding that the world is bigger than just your point of view, and again, going back to what you said earlier, really seeking to understand things from a holistic point of view. But I did see those guys too, man. I have seen like this red pill community really ramping up, and a lot of guys, I think what it shows too, bro, is like, because I'm like, man, you got a lot of guys, these guys got 500,000 to 1 million subscribers, some of these channels. And it just goes to show you, like, okay, you got a lot of broken men out here, because I've seen some videos where guys will go on these podcasts and they're like, man, what can I do, for looks max? It's all external things. Looks max are like career and money, but not to understand that, man, you are more than that. You are a spiritual being. You got a soul, you got emotions. Like, what internal work have you done?
You
And
seen that? You seen that looks max thing too?
yeah, man. Yeah.
That was my first time seeing it. I don't know if it was this morning or yesterday when a lady sent it to me. That was my first time seeing it. And Caleb,
Yeah.
it disturbed me so bad because my son, my 17-year-old, be talking about looks maxing. And he has my wife ordering all of this stuff. Like, he doing the coconut oil pulling, the tongue scraper, the jaw clencher for at night. He
Yeah.
got a skincare routine, and he done told, which I appreciate that he want to be, present himself, but I didn't know that it comes from a term called looks maxing, and that
Yeah.
it's this thing about. And so I had to talk to him today, and I probably didn't say it the right way, but I was like, son, do not ever watch that mess. Them are lames. Those guys are woman haters. They been taken advantage of, mistreated, and they have not healed. And they focusing on the wrong thing. I'm like, do not watch that stuff. And he was like, oh, you seen what I was telling you about? He's like, that's the podcast I was telling you about. He was like, it's hilarious to me. It's funny to me. He was like, because sometimes the guy be, roasting them or flaming them or something, he said. And I was like, he was like, sometimes it's just funny to me. But if you watching it, you still taking it in. Like, you
Yeah.
still, so I've heard
Yeah.
him say that term, and I've heard him, I was like, what would you want to do? What type of business would you want to do or something? And he was like, I want to do something with like aesthetics. He was like, I'm big into the aesthetics, like how you present yourself, how you look, like your teeth, your skin. And I'm like, I appreciate that. And I was like that too when I was around that age, but it can get carried away. And then we focus on that. And my son was telling me, he said, now the dude who got that show, that podcast, that YouTube, he said, now he asking the guys, he said, he asked the guy, take your shirt off. And I'm like, you really taking your shirt off for another man on the camera? And then he
Yeah.
was like, then show me your hairline. And then my son said, now the new line of question is, are you packing?
Whoa.
This a man to a man talking
Whoa.
about, are you packing?
Yeah.
And it's all men watching it.
Wow.
I said, are you kidding me?
And doing numbers at that, doing
Yeah.
numbers.
And the
Yeah.
dude, like real jacked and swole. And I told my son, I said, listen, whenever a man feel the need to get huge muscles, he covering something else up. It's something else that he feel insecure about in his life
Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
don't need that kind of muscle.
Yeah.
We need lean muscle. We need man strength, blue collar strength, but we don't have to have chest out to here, arms out to here, 99 abs. And I was blown away to see that. And so now it speaks to, not only do women need healing, and so that they could change the stereotype of being loud, of being aggressive, of being complaining, because there are certain truths to it. And that overshadows the women who are healed and doing the healing. And so it give a bad
Yeah.
look. But now we
Ooh,
also
good
got
point.
men that got to focus on healing
Yeah.
and understanding what really matters. Because it's like they want to look good, but what I realized, these guys want to look good so they can sleep with multiple women. It's,
Right.
it's not about meeting one woman and getting married and being faithful, because they also listening to guys talk about they were cheated on,
Yep.
but the guy not saying what he did or
Yep.
what we're not hearing the woman's side.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's different out here. Now, when you look at this and you see, and we talk about these stereotypes, how would you, as far as the loud black woman, the aggressive black woman, what do you think is the root cause of that effect? For those that is true for, what do you feel is the root of it from a male perspective? Because women probably know if they dig deep enough, even if they acting out in that way. But as a male, if you had to seek to understand, what would you feel like is the root of it?
Pain, hurt, the lack of certain presence within their life, whether it was healthy feminine presence or masculine presence. That's how I see it. Um, Ignorance of sorts, and not necessarily that they themselves are ignorant, but like they certain things they missed. They didn't have the opportunity to learn growing up, and it shows within their adulthood. That's how I see it. And again, I see it now from a compassionate perspective. But then also some of the ignorance is culturally, right? If you constantly listening to the world's music, the rap, the hip hop, the top 40s music, you watching Basketball Wives and all these reality TV shows, that is to keep us enslaved still. That is to keep us still in that we celebrate ignorance. We celebrate the ratchet woman. We celebrate being a baby mama. We celebrate hoish behavior, you know. I was just sitting just thinking through this the other day. I was thinking about like some of the new age big artists, and I was thinking about like Meg the Stallion. I'm like, man, how come we gotta, why can't she just be Meg the artist or Meg something else? Why is it gotta be Meg the Stallion, you know, or like Sexy Red? Why is it gotta be Sexy Red? Like these things are implemented intentionally to keep us over sexualizing one another, so we keep hurting one another, right? Just like the Willie Lynch letter happened years ago, it's new age systems that are in place that we aren't even aware of, and we keep perpetuating the same cycle of hurt and of ignorance on both sides. Men have their problems too, you know, but
Hey,
I
bro,
try and
before you go too far, you hit on something. Before we leave that, when you said Meg the Stallion, that's right there, allowing herself to be objectified
right, beast.
as a horse which has hips. The
Yep.
stallions have hips and booty.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so now the black woman is objectified. But why we
Yep.
don't have Katie the stallion?
Right.
We got Katy Perry.
Right.
We got Adele,
Taylor
you know,
Swift.
Taylor Swift. But
Yeah.
then we have Meg the Stallion, which everybody would listen to her music if her name was just Meg.
Right.
She could have been Mega Millionaire Meg,
Right.
Mega Meg, and we still will. And then the other one, Sexy Red. So again, objectification. Why we gotta be sexy? And then she's not what we consider as black people red. She our color
Right.
or darker. So red, that was always a term that you give to somebody that's like, biracial, or somebody that, what you call it, Creole, or the New Orleans type people. And but that's colorism. So it's like, no, you're not what people consider a red bone. So why you call sexy red? Unless it's sexy red and red stand for like the blood gang or something. But to me, that's colorism of like, here you are, this brown skinned woman, which could be a beautiful brown skinned woman, but you want to be labeled as a red bone or red because of what? And that's another stereotype we have perpetuated, that, okay, lighter is better, this complexion is better. And when you think about that and you look at just those images, and Cardi B, she Hispanic, but she deal with the black culture a lot. It's not really, she all in the black culture and doing songs with Meg Thee Stallion. And remember that song they did, WAP.
Yeah.
And it's like, when we really evaluate that, now all of those spirits going out over people. But that was a key point right there.
Yeah, it's something that I think about, man, because I try not to complain about our women. I try and seek, like, again, man, you said this on like 2 or 3 episodes ago, that seek to understand. And I'm like, you know what, I need to dive deeper into that. So I'm like, you know what, I'm not gonna point the finger. Let me try and understand. So that way, as we use this platform, I can be a leader to help lead the women out of that, and even Meg the Stallion, Sexy Red, I don't even fault them, because like you said, it's spiritual, right? Where Jesus said, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. Like sometimes we're just blinded. We're so blind that we don't even see the effects of what's going on. But man, I watched this movie on Netflix called, with Jamie Foxx, called Who Cloned Tyrone. I think, yeah, Jamie Foxx in that. I don't know if you've seen it now. Have you seen it?
Mm-mm. I ain't see it. It look, sometimes they change the images, and if the image kind of spooked me out a little bit, I don't watch
Yeah,
it.
I ain't gonna lie, it spooked me too, so I avoided it. But then somebody told me to watch it because it's a deeper message to it, man. It talks about the food, talks about the music, the frequencies of the song, and how these frequencies affect us, right? Certain frequencies, you listen to gospel music or classical music, it feeds your higher self, your intuition, right? You're more enlightened, you're brighter, you feel good about yourself. But then heavier music, 808s, deep beats, you want to gyrate, move, because it feeds your lower nature, even down to the colors. Red, being in the colors used for like fast food, McDonald's, Wendy's, like red feeds that lower nature, that hunger, for quickness, but not to go too deep into that. But it's really a spell. It's really like we're under a spell from the foods that we eat, the music that we listen to, the content that we consume. And then you look at who controls all of these major things, and you look at the way money flows. It's super deep, right? But it's slavery still exists today. It's just different. We're not in shackles. Some of us are that. And not to get away from that, we still have that within the prison system, but it's in the mind today of our people. That is the biggest thing. As long as we continue to keep over sexualizing our women, some of them are going to continue to feed the stereotypes, but we're still breeding more slaves. We're still breeding more people that are going to go from the school to prison pipeline. We're going to continue to breed more women that think the way to get a man's attention is just to show and offer the body, right? And influence is powerful. Like, how many of our little girls are growing up today in an unbalanced household, to where at an early age they have no filter, they can watch and see whatever they want on a phone, and the images that they see are women that look like them, that are half naked, right? But they have money. And you coming from the projects or an impoverished environment, you just want to survive and be somebody. you're looking at these people as your role models and superheroes and think, oh, this is the way to go. And I think this is done intentionally within our community. You know, not to say that we don't have other artists that are not very wholesome and have substance, but those that don't out trump them. You know, like they get the bigger voice, they get the bigger deals, they're on the radio every single day, versus the other person might be an independent artist, you know. So trying to see both sides. But man, I look at the root of this is deep, bro. It is deep. And just even like the shows, man, like, and how easily enamored women are by this, like, girl, you seen the housewives, or you seen that fight, or like they commenting like such and such was wrong. Like we feed into drama, we feed into ignorance, we've become addicted to it, you know. And so you said something earlier. So when somebody healthy comes into your life, whether it's a man or a woman, because you're so used to ignorance, you're like, man, I don't want that. When you used to eating genetically modified food and fried foods and stuff that has no nutrients in it, when nutrients comes around, you're like, man, I don't want no vegetables. I don't want that, because you don't have the connection to understand this is actually what's good for me. This is what I'm supposed to have, you know. But just generations of ignorance being passed down and not broken out of it. Like my hope, bro, is that we help free our people, but free them in the mind and free them in the spirit, free them from the Jezebel spirit, both men and women, a hoish spirit. I gotta keep sleeping around. I gotta show my body. I gotta show my money. I gotta show my chains. I gotta show all of this stuff to get the attention and likes from other people. You know, letting go of this external validation ploy that keeps us stuck. You know, how much of our money comes into our community and then goes right back out on luxury items and goods, but our community, for the most part, we don't own any real assets. We don't own anything where we're manufacturing the products that we buy, right? We're the number one consumers. Like that's wild to me. But again, I understand the system, I understand the ploy, I understand how it's implemented and used against us. And so yeah, whenever you have an Andrew Schulz makes a comment like this, we get an uproar about it, and we become emotional about it, but not think logically, okay, well, why am I triggered by this and where does this come from? And then as a group of people, how do we fix this and blend in, you know, bringing health back into our community? Um, so it's deep, bro. But I recommend, you know, take it with a grain of salt. But I think it's very insightful if you watch that movie, Who Cloned Tyrone. And for those
It's
of you who
interesting that you say that because considering what Jamie Foxx went through in real life when he was like real sick and he was in the hospital and he was just like ghost and people was like, did he get cloned? Did he get drugged? Did he get like they couldn't tell what was wrong with him? You know, he
yeah,
was sick. And as you were talking, it made me think about how mental slavery is more dangerous than physical slavery
yes,
because in physical slavery, your mind seeks freedom. So your mind is unchained and your mind becomes very creative because you are physically bound. Even when you look at the prison system, the artwork that comes out of prison on the cards, the birthday cards, the letters, the
yeah,
creativity, the way they do tattoos, the way they do haircuts. Like I was talking to my barber the other day, he did 2 years in prison and he had this comb and he had the comb had a razor in it and he was just doing like this to my hair and it was just like trimming it down and he was like this how I cut somebody hair in prison. He was like we wove took like out of a shaver or something and put it into a comb and then I just cut his hair like that. And then he was telling me about how they do the tattoos and all of this stuff and just the ingenuity because they physically are locked in. And so
yeah,
the mind is free, just like the slaves. When
yeah,
we were slaves, we mentally went to another place. And black people are literally, we'll never really know, but I looked it up and seen how black people who were enslaved and who were going through all of this, creating the shoelace, the hair comb, the hairbrush, the washing machine, the dryer, the
yeah,
iron, like all of this stuff. And I'm like, how are you going through so much? But now it's reverse. Now we've been set free physically and we are trapped mentally. And our minds now turn to reality TV, junk music.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of to see like the change that like Lil Durk trying to make, who in Chicago and supposedly has a lot of bodies or a lot of stripes in the street, but now he's saying that he's a religious man and he's not gang affiliated.
Yeah.
But when you think about, so we look at the women got the music, which keep them in the bed fornicating, keep them touching themselves, and keep them just dumbed down and seeking to overly sexualize themselves through the way that they dress based on the housewife shows and the way that the music artists dress. But then when you look at the men, black men literally are in the streets killing each other
Everybody want to be a gangster, even the
because of
NBA
our
player.
entertainment. Yeah,
Yes.
like the guy who just got killed, is it Julio Fulio or something out of Jacksonville,
Yeah.
because he rapping this stuff and then he on his ops grave and they digging up the ops grave, and then here
Yeah.
he go to a birthday party or something and get killed at like 26 years old.
Yeah.
And so it's like that right there, that attack. So we're gonna definitely have to do a part two on this, bro, and
Yeah.
just keep talking about, and we're gonna have to break down each. Whew. Hey, you watching this? Pray for us now, because y'all always talking about they killed Dr. CB and they killed this person and that person. Now, when we start breaking this stuff down and them shackles start coming off, and if you realize we're not using profanity and all of that, so your 15-year-old can watch this, your 16-year-old, so that they understand what that music is doing to them, what those YouTube channels is, what those TikTok channels is
Yeah.
doing to them, because
Yeah.
it's getting real.
Yeah, yeah. Now I agree. I agree. I know we wrapping up, but just to, impart this with the audience, um, don't feed into the stereotypes. Don't feed into the negativity. Don't allow negative things on the internet, clickbait, whatever it is, to stir your emotions and disturb your peace. Like, stay focused on who you are and what you have going on, and read. I want to encourage, I think freedom for our people starts with educating ourselves and detoxing, taking I'm gonna mention this every time, but taking a detox from social media, detoxing and learning your body, understand the foods that you're putting in your body and understand how they affect you. Are you feeling sluggish? Are you feeling energized? When we can align and put everything together in spirit, mind, and body, that's where we really get free and we get back to being who God has called us to be. And it doesn't matter race, creed, or religion. Like, when we all get back to that point, we're operating on the frequency of love. And man, we can free our people. We can go to another level. We can really come together as a people and let go of the cycles and patterns that has happened to us in the past. We are in a beautiful time in this day and age to where we have access and education right at our fingertips. There's no more excuses. So that's my last thoughts.
And although we addressing from black male perspective, to the Caucasians, to the Hispanics, the Asians, you welcome over here too, because
Yeah,
as
we
Caleb
all
said,
one.
we all one. We all one. We the human race, and it's good to get an understanding across the aisle, so to speak, so that we don't have to be across the aisle, so that we could be arm in arm, and we
Yeah,
can have that understanding. And it's a lady said to me yesterday or the day before in the comments, she was like, Tony, I was getting so depressed about all of the hate towards black women online. And as soon as I read that, I remembered this Caucasian lady, a white lady, showing this video of how on her phone she watched this video, and when she clicked the comments, she saw a certain set of comments that were like positive for women. And then on her husband's phone, they looked at the same video, but the comments he saw were completely different. And it was like negative stuff against women. Or,
yes,
and I was like, it's crazy that in times that I was struggling spiritually, like in spiritual warfare, and I got so many questions about like love, relationship, being a husband, being a father, I would go on social media and there would be videos that would like speak to what I was dealing with, but not in a positive way.
Right.
And I'm like, this is crazy that the stuff I'm seeing that I've been having conversations with my wife about, with my dad about, and just talking about the warfare I'm going on here. And I'm seeing all of this negativity, and it just adds to it. And so that's what I really started to realize. We got to curate our feed and what we're feeding ourselves
Yes.
physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally.
Yes. Yeah. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. The war is not outside of us. The war is within. When we can get self-discipline and self-control and we become aware of who we truly are, we're more guarded and we're more careful. We realize how sacred we are and realize like, oh, my body really is a temple. From my eyes to my mouth to my ears, my sex organs, everything about me is sacred. And so, yeah, man, the war is different today with the algorithm, bro. The algorithm, how come, man? I think the algorithm knows more people better than most people know themselves, and that's sad. But we can
Oh,
regain that power. We can
oh yeah.
regain that power.
Yeah. Hey, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Make sure, do me a favor and get a louder than words notebook. Now we'll release our own one day, like our own little journal, but get you a notebook so that when you're watching this, you're not just looking at the screen or listening mindlessly, but have a pen and pad so that you could jot down the different quotes and thoughts that you hear and add it with your own thoughts and feelings so that this could become a manual for your household, your legacy, your lineage. So thank you so much for joining us. Make sure that you lock in with us. We're moving right along. You can submit your topics. Caleb, what's the email?
Email is louderthanwords@gmail.com.
Louder than words at Gmail. It's nothing at the end of it, just louder than words.
Yeah, yeah, just louder than words at Gmail. Yep, yep.
Louder than words at gmail.com. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
All righty, peace.